The most terrifying sound in Seoul was not the siren of a police car, nor the scream of an ambulance navigating the heavy traffic of Gangnam. The most terrifying sound was the silence of Chairman Min Jun when he entered a boardroom. It was a silence that suffocated. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the lungs of men half his age. When Min Jun walked into a meeting, stocks plummeted and careers ended. He was a man who spoke in low tones and signed documents that erased companies from the map. They called him the Iron Ghost because he did not bleed, he did not negotiate, and he did not feel. But that was the man the world saw. That was the man who existed between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8:00 p.m. At 8:01 p.m., the biometric lock on the private elevator of the Millennium Tower penthouse would hiss open. The steel doors would slide apart, revealing a foyer lined with black marble, cold and imposing. Min Jun would step inside. His shoulders, usually set in a line of military, rigidity would drop exactly 1 inch. He would exhale, a long, ragged sound that smelled of stale coffee and repressed violence. And there, standing in the archway of the living room, bathed in the warm, amber glow of a floor lamp, would be Nia. She was not waiting like a servant. She was not waiting like a nervous mistress wondering if he was in a good mood. She was usually sitting in the oversized cream armchair, a book resting on her lap, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. At 54, Nia did not scramble for attention. She simply existed, anchoring the room with a gravity that rivaled his own. The first time she had stayed here, months ago, she had been terrified. She had waited for the other shoe to drop. She had waited for the man who destroyed empires to turn that cold gaze on her. But tonight, like every night for the past 3 months, the ritual was the same. Min Jun placed his briefcase on the console table. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, the armor that cost $10,000 and weighed 1,000 pounds, and hung it up. He walked toward her. He didn't speak. He didn't turn on the television. He didn't check his phone. He stopped in front of her chair. Nia looked up, marking the page in her book. She saw the fatigue etched into the lines around his eyes. She saw the shadow of the monster he had been all day. "You're back," she said softly. "I am back," he replied. His voice was gravel, but the edge was gone. He sank down onto the rug at her feet. The chairman of the Han Seong group, a man who made politicians tremble, sat on the floor, leaning his back against her legs. He closed his eyes and tipped his head back, resting it against her knee. Nia didn't ask him about the merger. She didn't ask who he had fired. She simply reached out her hand, her skin rich and dark against the silver-peppered black of his hair, and began to massage his scalp. She felt the tension leave him in waves. She felt the Iron Ghost dissolve, leaving only Min Jun, a 58-year-old man who was tired of being strong. "How was the world?" she asked quietly, her fingers working through his hair. "Loud," he murmured, his eyes still closed. "Sharp. Useless." "It's gone now," she whispered. "Yes," he breathed out. "It stays in the elevator." This was the secret. This was the truth that would have shattered the tabloids. The world believed that a woman's power lay in being shown off, in the diamonds she wore to the gala, in the way her husband paraded her for the cameras. But Nia knew better. She looked down at the most powerful man in the city, defenseless, at her feet. She wasn't hidden. She wasn't a secret because he was ashamed. She was a secret because he was hoarding his peace. She was the only place on earth where he didn't have to be a god. But that didn't mean the arrangement was easy. Nia had spent 20 years as a public wife, trained to smile when cameras flashed. The silence of the penthouse was a stark contrast to the noise of her past. Sometimes she wondered if she was disappearing. She looked at her reflection in the dark window across the room. She saw herself, but more importantly, she saw him. He shifted, turning his face to press a kiss against her knee through the fabric of her lounge pants. It was a gesture of such profound reverence that it made her throat tight. "Nia," he said, opening his eyes. They were dark, endless, and entirely hers. "Yes?" "I am starving," he admitted. "Not for food." She smiled, a genuine private thing. "Go wash your hands, Min Jun. I made stew." He stood up, groaning slightly as his knees popped, a reminder of their age, a reminder of their humanity. He looked down at her, and for a second the intensity returned. "You are too good to me," he said. "I know," she replied effortlessly. "That's why you keep the door locked." He didn't laugh. He just nodded, as if she had spoken a law of physics. "Yes, that is exactly why." As he walked toward the bathroom to scrub the day off his skin, Nia closed her book. She wasn't waiting for a ring. She wasn't waiting for a public declaration. She was realizing that for the first time in her life, she wasn't performing for an audience. She was simply living, and the retention of this peace was worth more than any magazine cover. But peace, in a city like Seoul, is fragile. And even the thickest glass cannot keep the world out forever. The weekends were their own universe. In her previous marriage, weekends were for networking, brunch with the ambassador, golf with the senators, charity auctions where she had to stand in heels for 6 hours and pretend to care about tax loopholes. Here, weekends were for the slow, deliberate art of doing nothing. It was a rainy Sunday in late autumn. The clouds hung low over the Han River, turning the city into a watercolor painting of grays and blues. Inside the penthouse, the air smelled of roasted barley tea and old paper. Minjun was in the kitchen. He was wearing reading glasses and a loose gray sweater that Nia had bought him. He was reading a newspaper, but his hand was resting on the counter, palm up. Nia walked past him. Without breaking her stride, she placed her hand in his. He squeezed it, once, firm and grounding, before letting her go. No words, no performance, just a check-in. "I am here. You are here. We are safe." She moved to the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. "Minjun?" she said. He turned a page. "Do you ever miss it?" He lowered the paper, peering at her over the rim of his glasses. "Miss what?" "The applause," she said, turning to face him. "The events. The way people look at you when you walk in with a beautiful woman on your arm. Don't you miss the validation?" It was a question that had been gnawing at her. Men of his status usually treated women as accessories. A tie pin, a watch, something to signal their virility. Minjun folded the newspaper slowly. He took off his glasses and set them on the marble counter. "Nia," he said, "come here." She walked to the kitchen island. He didn't reach for her. He just looked at her with that terrifying, absolute focus. Validation. He tested the word, as if it tasted sour. "Do you know what I see when I look at the couples at those galas? Success? I see hostages," he said bluntly. "I see men who are terrified that if they stop smiling, their stock prices will drop. I see women who are terrified that if they gain 2 pounds, they will be replaced." He picked up his tea, swirling the liquid. "I spent 30 years building a kingdom so that I would never have to care what people thought of me. Why would I invite them back into my life to judge who I love?" "Because," Nia said, leaning her hip against the counter, "most men want to be envied." Minjun stood up and walked around the island. He stopped inches from her. He smelled of sandalwood and soap. "I do not want them to envy me," he whispered, his voice dropping to that dangerous register. "I want them to know nothing." He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. "If they see you," he said, "they will try to find a way to use you against me. They will look for cracks. They will analyze your history. They will drag your name through the mud just to see if I flinch." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I am not hiding you, Nia. I am hoarding you." "Hoarding?" she chuckled softly. "Like gold?" "More valuable," he murmured, "like sanity." Nia closed her eyes. In her old life, she had been a trophy, polished, placed on a shelf, and dusted off when guests arrived. Here, she was the vault. "But surely," she whispered, "you must get bored. Just us. No entourage." "Bored?" He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "Nia, out there, I have to be the Iron Ghost. I have to be 5 steps ahead of everyone. I have to memorize lies and strategies. It is exhausting." He took her hand and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart. It was beating steady and slow. "This man," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The man who cooks stew, the man who sleeps without pills, the man who can sit on the floor and breathe." He paused, searching her face. "This man only exists with you. If you leave, he dies, and only the ghost remains." Nia felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't fear. It was the sudden, overwhelming realization of her own power. She wasn't invisible. She was essential. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Good," he said, "because I have planned our afternoon." "Oh? A strategy meeting?" "No," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching into a rare smile. "A nap. And perhaps you can read to me?" Nia laughed. It was a loud, uninhibited sound that bounced off the high ceilings. "The terrifying Chairman Min-jun wants a bedtime story?" "I want to hear your voice," he corrected. "It drowns out the rain." They moved to the sofa. He lay down, his head in her lap, his long legs stretched out. She opened her book and began to read aloud. Outside, the storm raged. The wind battered the glass. The city of Seoul churned with ambition, betrayal, and noise. But inside, there was only the sound of her voice and the rhythmic breathing of a man who had finally found a place to rest his sword. This was the seductive power of their secret. It wasn't about shame. It was about the luxury of being human in a world that demanded they be statues. But humanity is messy. And the problem with being the only person who sees the man behind the monster is that sometimes the monster comes home covered in blood. If you are loving this journey into the quiet, intense world of mature romance, please subscribe. Because in the next chapter, the outside world tries to break the lock, and Nia has to decide just how much of the monster she can handle. The shift happened on a Tuesday. Nia knew something was wrong the moment the elevator chimed. Usually the mechanism was smooth, a soft whoosh of air. Tonight, the arrival felt heavy. The doors opened. Min-jun did not step out immediately. He stood in the metal box, his hand gripping the rail so tightly his knuckles were white. Nia was in the kitchen, pouring wine. She set the bottle down. She didn't rush. She had learned that rushing made him defensive. She walked to the foyer. Min-jun stepped out. He looked wrecked. His suit was immaculate, but his tie was gone. His top button was undone. But it was his face that stopped her. His skin was gray, drained of color. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated, staring at something Nia couldn't see. And there was a smell. Beneath the expensive cologne, there was the metallic tang of adrenaline and something darker. "Min-jun?" she said softly. He flinched. He actually flinched. He held up a hand. "Don't." His voice was a rasp. "Don't come closer." Nia stopped. She stood 5 feet away from him. "What happened?" "Business," he said. The word sounded like a curse. "Ugly business." He walked past her, giving her a wide berth, as if he were contagious. He went straight to the liquor cabinet in the living room and poured a glass of scotch. His hands were shaking. Nia watched him. She saw the tremor. She knew who he was. She wasn't naive. You don't become a chaebol chairman without crushing people. You don't earn the name Iron Ghost by baking cookies. But she had never seen the violence cling to him like this. He downed the drink in one swallow and poured another. He stood with his back to her, staring at the black window. "Go to bed, Nia," he said. His voice was cold, sharper than she had ever heard it in this house. "No," she said. He turned around. His eyes were blazing. "I said go to bed. I am not fit for company tonight." "I don't want company," Nia said, stepping into the living room. "I want to know why." "My partner is shaking." "Partner?" He let out a harsh, barking laugh. "You are not my partner in this. You are the innocents. That is the deal. I handle the filth. You keep the house clean." "I am not a maid, Min-jun," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "And I am not a child. I have seen ugly things. Do not condescend to me." He stared at her, stunned by her tone. "I destroyed a man today," he confessed. The words vomited out of him. "A friend. He betrayed the company. I had to cut him out, entirely. His family, his legacy, gone." He looked at his hands as if he expected to see blood. "He begged me," Minjun whispered, "and I felt nothing. That is the worst part. I looked at his ruin, and I felt nothing but annoyance that it was taking so long." He looked up at Naya, his expression fracturing. "I am a monster, Nia. You are playing house with a monster." The silence stretched, taut as a wire. This was the test. This was the moment most women would back away. This was the moment the bad boy fantasy dissolved into the terrifying reality of a ruthless man. Nia looked at him. She saw the guilt eating him alive. She saw that he did feel something. He felt horror at his own numbness. She didn't leave. She walked forward. "Stay back," he warned, backing up until he hit the glass of the window. "I will stain you." Nia closed the distance. She reached out and took the glass of scotch from his hand. She set it on the table. Then she took his hands. They were cold as ice. "Look at me," she commanded. He refused. He looked at the floor. "Minjun, look at me." He dragged his gaze up to meet hers. He looked terrified that he would see disgust in her eyes. "You are not a monster," she said firmly. "Monsters don't come home and shake. Monsters sleep soundly." "I won't sleep tonight," he whispered. "Then we will stay awake," she said. She raised his hands to her face, pressing her cheek against his cold palms. She rubbed her skin against the rough texture of his fingers. "You do what you have to do out there to survive," she said. "I know the world is a war. I know you are the general." She kissed his palm. "But in here, you surrender." "I don't deserve this," he choked out. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," Nia agreed lightly. "But you have me, so you might as well let me help." He broke. The iron ghost crumbled. He collapsed forward, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He held on to her with a desperation that bordered on pain. "If you were not here," he muffled into her skin, "I would be a monster. I would turn into stone." "I know," she whispered, stroking the back of his head. "Then stay human with me." They stood there for a long time, the city lights flickering below them like indifferent stars. He was heavy against her, a dead weight of guilt and exhaustion. But Nia didn't buckle. She held him. She absorbed the coldness radiating off him until her own. Warmth began to seep back into his bones. This was the intimacy the world would never understand. They thought intimacy was sex, or romance, or diamonds. Real intimacy was witnessing the ugly parts of someone and not looking away. Real intimacy was washing the blood off a soldier's hands and telling him he was still a man. The morning sun hit the penthouse with a brilliance that felt apologetic. Nia woke up alone in the massive bed. For a moment, panic flared. Had he left? Had the shame of the night before driven him away? She sat up, pulling the silk robe around her. She walked out into the living room. Minjun was there. He was standing on the balcony, the glass doors open to the crisp morning air. He was wearing his lounge pants and a white t-shirt. He was holding 2 mugs of coffee. He heard her footsteps and turned. He looked different. The grayness was gone. His eyes were clear. He looked like a man who had survived a fever. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Nia replied, walking toward him. He held out a mug. "Hazelnut, 2 sugars." She took it, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "You remembered." "I remember everything about you," he said. He stepped back inside and slid the glass door shut, muffling the sound of the city. He looked at her, and the intensity of his gaze was different now. It wasn't desperate. It was settled. "About last night," he started. "You don't have to explain," Naya said. "I do," he countered. "I need you to know something. In 58 years, no one has ever stayed. When I show them the darkness, they leave, or they ask for money to stay." He took a step closer. You didn't ask for anything. I have everything I need, Nia said. She looked around the room, the quiet, the safety, the man standing before her who would burn the world down to keep her warm. I realized something, Min-jun said. I have spent my life building walls to keep people out. I thought power was isolation. He reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. But this, he lifted their joined hands. This is power. To be known, to be seen, and to be forgiven. Nia squeezed his hand. We are happy here, Min-jun, in the quiet. Yes, he said. We are. He led her to the sofa, and they sat down. The morning news was playing softly on the television, muted. Images of the stock market, images of the scandal involving the man Min-jun had destroyed yesterday. The world was chaotic, loud, and judgmental. But in the penthouse, the volume was turned down to 0. Nia rested her head on his shoulder. He draped his arm around her, pulling her close. She thought about her friends back in the States. They would ask her why she was single, why she didn't have a husband to show off on Facebook. They would pity her for being alone at 54. She smiled. A secret, satisfied smile. They didn't know that she was loved more fiercely in the dark than they were in the light. They didn't know that she held the heart of the Iron Ghost in her hands. I love you, Min-jun said. He said it casually, simply, as if he were commenting on the weather. Nia froze. He had never said it. Not once. She looked up at him. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the muted TV, his face calm. You said it, she whispered. He turned to her, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips. I realized I had not said it aloud. It seemed inefficient to keep it inside. Nia laughed, tears prickling her eyes. Inefficient. Yes, it is a fact. I love you, and I will protect you, even for me. Nia kissed him. It was soft, lingering, and tasted of coffee and promise. I love you too, she said. Outside, the city of Seoul rushed on. Deals were made. Hearts were broken. Images were curated for the public eye. But high above the noise, in a fortress of glass and steel, a man and a woman sat in silence. They were invisible to the world, and in that invisibility, they were completely perfectly free. They had built a sanctuary that no one knew existed, and for now, the walls held. But secrets are like fire. They keep you warm, but they also cast a light that others can see. And in part 3, someone is going to notice the smoke. Subscribe now, because the Iron Ghost has enemies who are starting to wonder why he has suddenly become so human. And when they find out the reason is Nia, the sanctuary will become a siege. You do not want to miss what happens next.